Hey, what's up guys? Travis here with Every Single Sunday, and welcome back to Project Blueprint, our 2024 KTM 500 EXCf. In today's video, we are going to be looking at getting this bike running better up to its full potential. First off, let me say these are modifications for a bike that will no longer be used on the street, so these are for off-road purposes only. In today's video, we will be looking at a DeSmog kit from Takamoto Co. We'll be looking at an exhaust, and we'll be looking at our Get ECU that we're putting on the bike, or whatever fuel tuner you want to use. They sell Get, they sell AIM, and then they also have some piggyback systems like the DynoJet. So let's go ahead, jump into this, and see what we're dealing with. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this DeSmog kit and see what comes with it. This right here is going to be your O2 dust dongle. So basically, your O2 sensor is going to get unplugged because the Get ECU, the AIM Sports one, they don't use an O2 sensor. So this is basically just a dummy plug that you put in its place to keep the harness from getting all messed up. So we'll be disconnecting the O2 sensor, and this little plug is going to go right in its place. Next up, we have this little stainless steel plug here. It comes with a brass washer, and this is actually going to go in the head pipe of the bike once you remove the O2 sensor. Next up is this bad boy. This is our vapor recovery system delete dongle. Once you unplug the hose from your vapor recovery canister, this is going to go in that, keep it clean, and I think there's an emulator in here that sends a reading, but I'm not 100% sure. Next up is the portion labeled the Smog Delete Kit. So in here, you're going to have 4 rubber caps. 3 of them are the same, and 1 is a little bit tinier. You're also going to have this kickstand bolt that's shorter, and then this other little screw with a brass washer on it. So the 3 rubber caps that are the same size, these are the 3 that are going to go on the vapor recovery canister that's in the down tube of the bike. So all 3 of those are identical. They're going to be used on the same part. Next up in this part, you're going to have the small rubber nipple, and that's interchangeable with this little screw with the brass washer here. So this is going to go on the right-hand side of your throttle body, and you can either unscrew the nipple on the bike and put this screw in its place, or just cap it off. I've heard horror stories of people breaking that nipple off trying to remove it from the throttle body, so I'm going to go ahead and just put this rubber cap on it right here and call it a day. Next up is this bolt that comes here. So this is actually for your kickstand from the dealership. The bike will have a kickstand return spring unless the dealership changed it. Basically, when you go to move your bike or lift it up off the stand, the spring kicks up on its own. So this screw goes in place of the stock one, and you just take the collar off. It's similar to the stock one. It's just shorter, easy to swap out. This hose here is a gas tank breather line. Inside the blue section, there's a little tiny ball that rolls back and forth, and it's a check valve, so fuel doesn't pour out of your bike when you drop it. Most people just have a standard hose that goes on the bike, but this one just works a little bit better and keeps things from leaking. So this big rubber hose and this massive rubber cap, these are to cap off and separate the breather that comes out of the cylinder head on your bike and goes into the airbox on the 2023 bikes or into the throttle body on the 24 and newer bikes. All right, so I've already pulled this out of the bike, but I want to show you what it is and where it lives. This is the vapor recovery canister here, and this lives here inside the down tube on the front of the bike. So what you get when you buy this part is in the down tube, like I was saying, and you'll see these spigots here and here, and you'll see these sticking out of the frame here, here, and then down on the inside here, right back there in front of the cylinder head. So if you want to remove this like I did, you have to unscrew all 3 of those, take your head pipe off, and then this will slide down and out of the bike. Now, 99% of you, including my last bike, my 22 there, I've never pulled this out. I was waiting for parts. I got bored. I wanted to see what it was like. So usually you just put the 3 rubber caps on here, here, and there, and call it a day. On the left-hand side of the bike, you will have this piece right here that kind of runs from the hose, and this recovers your vapors. And there's a little bracket that sits right here on the 24 bikes. On the 2023s, it lives a little bit further down. So there's a plug that goes here and goes up to the ECU. So we're going to put a block off plug in that one. Then this other side of the hose here runs underneath here. Runs underneath there, and here's what we're looking at. And it comes to this little nipple right here that's sticking out. Come on, focus camera. And this essentially just clips on and puts some unburned vapors back into the system. So we're gonna block that off. This is the piece here that I was saying you can either unscrew and risk breaking it off, or just put the rubber cap on there and call it a day. I'm just gonna put a cap on there. This is where our O2 sensor used to live. We're just gonna basically put a little plug in there that came with the kit, using that brass washer, tighten that down and not think about it ever again. So this big hose is gonna be a breather for the head of the bike, and you can see where it comes out on the other side there. And essentially right now, this runs and it dies off into the air box. So any overflowing oil is gonna spit into the back of your filter here and vice versa. We're gonna put a big rubber plug on the back side of this to cap off where it goes into, and then we're gonna run our new hose from the breather down and out the bottom of the bike like an off-road bike should be, because this is no longer a street legal vehicle. So here is our O2 sensor we're moving from the bike. Like I said, this will not be used with it, doesn't read anymore. You can leave it in place on the bike if you want, or you go ahead and remove it completely. That will be the small white plug here. Just go ahead, cap that off. This plug here was part of our vapor recovery canister. We're gonna use this emulator to plug it in, little tricky thing. Plugs right in. You want to put this little wire piece back in here that you had to remove to disconnect it. That way it stays together. Now we're gonna go ahead and tie this stuff up out of the way. I think a good spot will be up here underneath that. All right, so we have our two plugs here and here tied up in this pocket, out of the way, zip tie there. And then we had to replace an OEM zip tie I cut to make a little bit extra room here. So everything's up nice and tidy, out of the way, straps are back on in place, and it's gonna be where we'll never have to think about it again. Installing the plug for the O2 sensor removal is pretty straightforward. Get an Allen wrench that fits, use your little brass washer, and just snug that down so it doesn't come out on you. Next up, we're going to install this little rubber cap. This is the smallest. It's the only one that comes in this size, and it's going to go on this little barb right here. Like I said, you can remove this if you want completely and put that screw in place, but I've heard of people breaking it off, so we're just going to cover it. It's a little difficult to get on there, so use a little bit of saliva or some other sort of lube to push it on so that it doesn't come off. All right, last part we're going to put on is this guy and the big black hose. On these new 24 models, everything's pretty accessible from the top right here. You can see one clamp here goes into the boot. On the other bikes, it went all the way back to the airbox. And on this half, you're going to see where it goes right there into, there you go. So we're going to basically put this rubber cap on this half, and then we're going to disconnect this half of the hose and run the long black one all the way down out alongside the shock. All right, so looking in there, you can see our cap right there, and we put a zip tie on to make sure it stays on there. The stock aluminum clamp that was on there didn't fit very well because this is thinner than the hose. All right, so we have our main breather hose hooked up there. We reused the crimp on it, and right now that's just kind of running down here, and it's loose. Once we get the shock in, we'll position it where it needs to go, but it'll lay down here on one side of the shock or the other. All right, guys, next up, let's talk exhaust. There are two systems I would put on my personal bike that I've run on my personal bike, and those are either going to be the Graves slip-on with the stock head pipe, or the stock muffler and just the ProMoto billet end cap. The difference between these two, the ProMoto billet end cap reuses the stock muffler. It's just a tip, essentially. It sells for $160 from Takamoto. It's dirt cheap. Or you can do the Graves full muffler, the slip-on like I did. Sells for $725. So quite a big difference there, and not a whole lot of difference in performance, honestly. You're going to save about 5 pounds of weight with the Graves. It's titanium, it's carbon, it looks nice. This is a nice build. I wanted the bitchin' muffler on my bike, so we're going to go ahead and put the Graves on here. Basically, all you need to do is take the two outer bushings off the stock muffler, transfer them onto this muffler, slide it in, and replace the exhaust spring. It's that simple. If you do the ProMoto billet end cap, it's a little bit more work. You got to take some screws out, drill some new stuff, and tap some stuff. I've done it before. It's nice and easy. I love it. It's cheap, and it works almost as good as this. If you're looking to make more top-end power for your bike, that's like wide open supermoto performance or hill climbs, that type of stuff, an FMF system will work better in the top end, but this Grave Systems works better in the bottom end. It's tuned for it, and it's a fantastic muffler that I feel is the best for the bike. Let's talk ECUs for a minute. I didn't end up installing this when I was filming the other day. I ran out of time, but it's all pretty straightforward as far as putting it on the bike. Let me talk though about some options. Takomoto has a few, and Tako does their own mapping for their Get ECU, for the AIM Sports, and for stuff like DynoJet. So if you're buying from Tako, you're going to get something you don't get from anybody else. The reason I went with the Get is I like that it has a barometric pressure sensor on the top. I like that it's the one they work on the most over there. So I feel it's going to be their best mapped products. If it was me, I'd go for this. If you want a little bit more feature rich product, you want the traction control, you want launch control, you want the barometric pressure sensor, all those things are good, even if you're not going to use them. If you're going to go something a little bit cheaper, look at the DynoJet, the Power Commander 5. It's a piggyback that works off your stock ECU. The Smog equipment install will be a little bit different, but pretty much the same. And that system's in the $500 range versus the $1,000 range. So yeah, for me, either the Get SX1, the SX1 is required for the 2024 and newer bikes, or you can use the older RX1 on the previous generations up to 23 if you can find one. I know Takomoto's only selling the SX1 now for the 500s from 20 forward, I believe. But if you have a 350, you can still get the RX1. Anyway, guys, hope this video helped you with everything you're looking for. Have fun, get out and ride.